I talk to a spirit. She comes in my dreams.
What is the path to awakening supposed to look like, to feel like? How do you know if you are on it? We ask these very sacred and sometimes vulnerable questions to many different women from all walks of life. A conversation that needs to be shared and heard. I'm Jo Hendy.
I'm Amanda Parker.
And welcome to the Girl Awakening podcast.
Hello, beautiful lady.
Good morning. Good morning.
Oh, I can just feel that this one today, like many of our podcasts, we are going to go on a ride.
Yeah.
Yeah. I already felt my heart crack a little bit, just even moments before speaking to this beautiful lady.
There's a twinkle in the air, and the area that we're going to be speaking into, it just feels like for when this episode's going to come out, it's just going to hold such a beautiful space for so many people just to tap into and receive what our guest has to share. So
yeah. So we've had this lovely lady on once before. She was our first NDE guest, and it was so beautiful. So we are so honoured to welcome back Dr Maxine Therese today from Childosophy, which we love. Welcome, Maxine. Thank you for joining us on Girl Awakening.
Oh, thank you, Jo. Thanks, Amanda. I'm delighted to be here. Lovely to see you both.
Yeah, yes, we love you too. I actually wanted to jump straight in. And you said something before we actually started recording around remembering who we are. And it literally did something, like it cracked something open in me.
Yeah.
Would you be able to share that with the guests that are listening now?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before we sort of jumped on the call, we were talking about notions of, understanding, I guess, the evolution of stuff that goes on. And for me, it's been always really important to come from the essence of who we are. And my work has really revolved around understanding that we're souls. And if we're on this soul journey, what do we need? Like, what does the soul need if we are to see ourselves in that way? And so that's really what I feel is an important contribution that I can bring forward, is this notion, and it hasn't been an easy one to further, that we're souls, that we come into this physical form with so much more than what we even know, so much more that others really don't understand about cultivating a soul, I guess. So in our journey, we're looking at the essence of who we are to be mirrored back to us. And I think we go through life, and I've sort of said this before, that we go through life looking for a reflection of our unique soul, of this divine spark that we all carry within us in a way, looking outside, like almost like looking like, I don't know if you know that children's storybook, Where's My Mother? Like we go around looking, are you my mother, or are you my soul? Is this my soul thing? Does this light me up? And I think we sort of all go through life in a way looking for a reflection of what is within us. And I think for me personally, it's been a journey that I have looked unconsciously, I guess, or spontaneously to start with, and then more consciously as I grew and became a mother. And now in my later years of mothering to adult children, still looking at what reflections are we sending back to those that we're in the service of nurturing. What are we being for ourselves? How do we activate our potential? How do we bring our soul forward? And that's always been really important to me. I pretty much see everything from the soul perspective. So I don't know if that answers your question, Jo. Yeah.
In so many ways, like so much just opened up for me just with your communication there. But the one thing that did pop in just at the end there for me was around that purpose of nurturing. And we tend to, well, I'll speak for myself. The one thing that I am coming out of is this this searching, like you were saying, searching for the reflection, but all out here, and not realizing that there are these two divine sparks that I have in my children that are giving me everything that I need, in the way of learning, my lessons, everything. And the thing that I've been noticing is that I've been looking outside of that, like beyond them, and then realizing more now, wow, my kids are really going out of their way to show me what I need to learn the most. So when you just said that, it really hit home on another level for me around, our children are definitely here to support us to become the best versions of ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, just even in that order, Jo, like it's that looking outside. We spend a lot of time looking outside ourselves, not even realizing that we actually have everything we need within ourselves for our own perfect self-development. But in the mothering journey, when we have children, a lot of what we need gets projected onto them. So it's almost like they help us, if we can see it that way, to uncover, I guess, the gaps in our own potential or the gaps in our own needs, so that we can fulfill those and really bring our purpose out to the world. But the whole dynamic is really interesting. And as you said, like children are the best reflections. I think because they activate at different levels. Biologically, they carry within them all of the history of everything that's ever happened generationally for mum and dad, and they have their own soul destiny as well. So managing and knowing how to work with that, I guess, is really important for the parent to understand from a primary basis that, maybe we're bigger than what we're told. Maybe this existence that we have is much bigger than what I've grown up believing, or perhaps one framework or one structural frame of how we understand the world can give me. And really that's what I went in search of, because when I became a mum, I realised that my children were triggering things in me that I didn't understand about myself, because they were so buried in a way that I couldn't see them as part of my experience, but I was seeing them in them, and offered me a way to look at what is it in me that's getting activated to this natural progression of child to toddler to kindergarten, whatever stages and ages the kids go through. And then I was really interested to explore who am I? Most mothers, most parents, but I think particularly mothers, go through this rebirth, as many people are now talking about, when they become mothers, and then knowing where to put our focus. And I guess because it is that nurturing role, so much focus goes on the child, but if we can simultaneously spend that time focusing on what it is in me that's getting activated as I take on this nurturing or caregiving role, that's much healthier in a way, even though they're our reflection and they're going to mirror those things back. Just the importance of that, to self-reflect and to look at what's happening physiologically in my body as I support this soul, who not just carries all of the family inherited patterns of behaviour, traumas, as well as wonderful potentials, and their own destiny. What is their soul, and what did they choose to come in to help humanity with? Managing those things, I think, is really, for me, as such a passion. But the primary thing is for us as the caregiver, or us as a human being, to see ourselves from that bigger perspective. And most of us, as we would all recognise, didn't grow up with that. It's only really been in the last couple of decades that we can even entertain these ideas, because we certainly weren't allowed to learn about them or talk about them in circles that didn't agree with what was being spoken about. So even in the academy and the medical institutions and all of those things, how much they've shifted in the last 20 years to actually open to different perspectives other than the ones that we've carried through, which we all know are very limiting.
Oh my goodness, so limiting. It makes me feel a little bit sad to think that, imagine if we didn't, have that little tap to go, hang on a minute, they responding to my, you know, whatever I need to handle or deal with, instead of just yelling and screaming and then putting them in the naughty corner kind of thing.
Yeah.
So thank God. Yeah. Thank God we got the shake up. I just wanted to actually just quickly say too, around the biological connection and the patterns that come down through generational, because I have 4 grandchildren that are not biological, but they do not feel like that at all. As in, there's no blood connection. I don't like to use step. They're my bonus grandchildren. And there's a couple of them in particular that I'm extremely close with, that I have a very strong connection with, that I can feel when things aren't right.
Yes.
Which has been a big eye opener for me too, and also cut the cords of this belief that, you know, you have to be blood or whatever to feel a strong connection. To be family. That belief has literally just gone out of my world.
How beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I was listening to you, hearing you say then too, Maxine, is like how the blessing of space in the relationship between, you know, being a parent and as you said, that rebirthing experience that is very much like, you know, in day-to-day terms you can say, and the words just came out of my mouth, exactly what my mother used to say to me, and I swear I was never going to say that. You know, that's how mundane it is, but it's like it's a very and what Jo was just sharing then, the energetic and frequency resonance of those relationships. I mean, it's a very multi-layered, multifaceted dynamic, isn't it? And sometimes that inherited material has a life force of its own in the way that we get triggered, as you shared, or the way that we behave in certain situations, or the way that we feel we need to be our best parent. And sometimes that's completely opposite to what we experience because we want to get so far away from that. Or, you know, carrying on certain behaviours.
Yeah, absolutely.
Best intentions.
You know, and I just want to jump back to Jo's reflection and then tie that in, I think, Amanda, because beautifully, like I think when we see ourselves from an energetic perspective, we really do see that we share a field of energy. We share a quantum existence. We're all part of the whole. And anything that's unresolved in the whole really demands calibration or reparation, or it really does. Like that's the universe. It's sort of self-healing. And I think that when we start seeing things energetically, then those that we resonate with, those that we have a vibrational match with, in a way, those that we're close to, those that we're in physical space with, we really do become so attuned to each other. And the attunement really will meet the quality that we've developed in ourselves. However, when it's almost like it's a process that we all go through, is to figure out what it is that makes me feel good. And then we usually attract people that encourage that and support that. And then, of course, any children born into a system like that, they're going to feel so aligned, and you really can't tell the difference between what we call a biological inherited connection or this soul connection, which I believe we choose at some level to come in to share experiences that are going to grow and expand our souls. So you would know each other at some level as well, Jo.
I dreamed of them before they were even here.
Yeah.
So they came and spoke to me before they were even here in physical form. So I knew that,
Yeah, just beautiful. And Amanda, you know, what you were saying is like we have to make the space for that. And when we're busy with the practicalities of raising children and the day-to-day survival needs and all of those sorts of things, it is hard to do a step back and take a breath and not repeat the patterns of the past, not come out with our mother's words as we're enraged about something or in a hurry to get out the door. So the call really is to, one, just see ourselves from a different perspective, which then can literally crumble so much to even take that step onto that. But I know all of your listeners are already sort of awakening and on the journey. So it's almost like, I think the biggest thing is to start to shift the way we view ourselves, our lives, and our purpose here on the planet. And I think that's sort of paramount. Once you have a yearning for that, or once the soul connects with that remembered yearning, then all sorts of things take place within our body to reconfigure us ready for the new, which is really what the children are. Yeah. And I love saying about the idea of our children come in with their own future, not ours, you know. So if we want to support children, we have to get to know them at a level of what they're bringing in with us, because they were born in a different era and they have a different purpose toward the greater whole of humanity than what we did. So it's every generation is improving and expanding, I guess, is probably more appropriate. Expanding in the way that they perceive energies, expanding in the way they communicate energies, expanding in the way they express energies. And then rather than shutting down those things perhaps that were done generationally, or, you know, in my certainly when I was a small child, you sort of had particular types, and you know, people did particular things, and if you lived in a particular town, you did certain things. Do you know what I mean? Whereas now, it sort of doesn't matter where you are geographically. You can have access to pretty much anything that's out in the world, and it's much more, you know, technology and artificial intelligence is definitely speeding all of that up, but it's much more okay for difference. Whereas generations before, maybe the last 20 years, there wasn't really much room for difference. You were made wrong, you were dismissed, you were relegated to a particular psychopathology, or, you know, whatever. It wasn't really like, oh, hey, this person's bringing forward something in me that's really stuck because I keep fighting them. I wonder what that's about.
So real.
Remembering. It's funny just hearing you say that now. I'm thinking of one of my children, and the realization that I've been having recently is that you have to yell loud so people will do, you know, hear what you're saying and do what you're saying, kind of thing. You know, that's a real control aspect that I'm working on.
Yes.
And realizing that I got that from my dad. You know, my dad would yell and scream, but I would listen to him, you know, and I'd be almost a little bit scared of him.
Yes.
But now I'm letting go of that trait that's come down, and I'm noticing that my children, you know, when I've yelled at them and attempted to use that form of control, where they withdraw. And now I'm having another realization where I was them at one stage in my life, you know, where I was the sensitive, quiet child that just wanted to be spoken to softly and lovingly, but was never allowed that opportunity. So I took on the role of like my father, like that generational.
Yes.
And being able to reflect on that is sometimes confronting, because to see me as sensitive is like, oh, that's a lot, you know, after being this almost, hate the word aggressor, but that's the feeling, you know. It's like I feel like I'm breaking down this old way of being.
Yeah, and in a way too, Jo, like I think what you're explaining to me, and just to reflect back, and I love this, because in a way it's sort of like it's that polarity, it's the male female in a way. Does that make sense? Like it's almost like I'm responding in a way that you were saying aggressor, but sort of is a little bit more active or aggressive, and then getting used to being more passive or maybe receptive is a challenge, because we live on a seesaw. Does that make sense? And really that dynamic lives in our need to act. So my needs model, which talks to what are the 7 needs for a soul or for a child, says that we're really energetic beings with these needs which align with the chakras. But if there's an excess in the need to act, which is our control center, we will be controlling, pushy, dominant, do as I say, get that done, I've already asked you. And if it's deficient, we're all being mothers, if it's deficient, we'll be like, oh, I can't ask them, and we'll tippy-toe around on eggshells, and we won't have an ability to say what we need. Yeah, so it's almost like what we're doing energetically is we're harmonizing, or we're tuning our instrument. Yeah. So if we look at that particular experience as a parent, we can go, oh, my need to act needs some work. Yeah, so I might do some things that are looking at what do I carry through the line from my own childhood and generationally or culturally, like what has cultures done with this idea of control? And we can work on it at that level. But you said beautifully, you have a memory. So we're all beautiful beings that draw on all sorts of resources to help us expand, and mostly what we do with those memories is close them down. So it was like you were saying too, Amanda, like how do we sort of work through all of those heavinesses that come to parenting? And it's almost like, well, if I can see this as an energy that's common for all bodies, then when my body gives me an awareness, or I have a memory or a feeling or an intuition about something that doesn't feel right to me, then I can draw on my history. But mostly it's forgotten because we forgot we were the sensitive little girl.
Yeah.
We forgot that. And we forgot how it felt to have a big person tell us or demand of us without giving us freedom to stand up for ourselves or do our own thing or choose our own thing. So they're all concepts that sort of tie to what you were speaking about. And it's a dance. Yeah, it's this constant dance. And then as you move through that and develop that aspect of balance in your life, you'll bring forward more things in that need that you can cultivate. Does that make sense? But often we get down on ourselves, we feel guilty, we judge ourselves in a way that sort of turns into martyrdom type of relating, in a way like, oh, I shouldn't have done that, and I didn't want that when I was a child, and I should never have done that, rather than going, wow, I'm realizing so much about this concept of what it means to be powerful in my own body, and I'm realizing that to dominate another means that I can cultivate my own inner power, because if I want to dominate someone else, it's because I'm not feeling in control.
That is so powerful and just so freeing, and listening to you reflect that back and the dance that you just shared. I was reflecting on a very clear moment that I had when my children were little, and someone saying to me, you need to speak louder, you need to show them who's boss, you need to use a stronger voice to get them to do things, not listening to you. And up until that point, my relationship with my children, and my son was a late speaker, like he was very clever and introspective and all those things, and we used to have like our own sort of language, if you like, always understood each other. And I can clearly remember this point in time when this person said, you need to raise your voice. And just hearing you speak then, and in that moment in time, and going, oh, okay, so I need to be more authoritative. I need to, be the parent, and it wasn't my resonance, but I adopted it. And I feel like I've come full circle, 18 years later, nearly 20 years later, to going to, and in that journey of exploring myself and who am I, that I've been stuck in that dynamic where raising my voice meant I stepped more into the yang, the control of the doing, as opposed to the feminine, flowing, receptive, which is my natural state.
You are.
And I, raising my voice in a song or something, but not in I don't need to raise my voice for people to hear what I have to say.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's been a very powerful lesson and learning.
Yes. And that need to speak, which is our fifth need, you know, in a way, Amanda, you know, we're told, aren't we? We're told, oh, you shouldn't do that, you should do that, or why don't you try that, or you're not doing enough of this. And I think that's sort of the instruction that we've received. Not everyone, but generally culturally, it's like we tell others how to raise their children rather than yeah, so don't do that, do that, when there's no attunement. Like you're not in a position, or perhaps as a young mum, you're not really confident in your own self-expression where you can say, you know what, this works for us. Yeah. And we're developing our own way of communicating that is allowing us to learn and grow together as we bring our voice to the world. But we are, and we sort of feel as a default there's something wrong, don't we, when someone says, oh, you should do more of that. It's sort of like, oh, am I doing something wrong, rather than this is sort of what we're doing at the moment. And advice is wonderful. Like I read a lot, I welcome any sort of advice, but it has to resonate. And when you said to me, or when you just said then, Amanda, that it didn't resonate, it didn't resonate. So then we adopt sort of a false self. This is the false mother, you know. I'm going to speak more directly. I'm going to repeat myself, or whatever we've decided. And the child sort of knows that's not your authenticity.
Yeah,
they sort of know, mum's acting like that's not my mum.
Why is she being funny? Why is she being weird? And then it's you're not in your truth, and they know, they
sense that, and
as a result.
Absolutely, and all sorts of things can happen in that process, because as we're learning and growing to trust our own intuitions as women, you know, we can wobble too. So we might think, oh, I didn't deliver that properly, I've got to learn how to do that again, or you know, this is who I am now, we might say to the child, and this is what I'm learning how to communicate more clearly, or whatever. And then the child will challenge us, and then I guess we might listen to them as the authority instead of the person who said, don't do that. Now, this is a really interesting point that I'm raising, because I believe that we need to give children the freedom to be themselves and to help us to understand them from a soul perspective. But when it comes to parenting, the parent always really, in a way, has to be the parent. Yeah. They've got to be the parent and clearly demonstrate to the child that I'm taking care of my needs. Yeah. I'm taking care of them. I'm not going to expect you to learn with me as I'm developing my need to speak because I listen to everyone else and don't trust my own intuition. That's too much for a child. Yeah. So what we need to do in a way is sort of look at ourselves and go, oh, and someone's telling me what I should do, and that makes me feel something. And then as a result of me feeling that something, I'm now projecting that onto one of the most important relationships in my life, because I haven't developed that in myself. So that's the awareness. Does that make sense? So children are actually going to say to you, you're actually not being your true self. Like they won't say that, but they'll kick back. They'll bring forth something that challenges us. Like, are you for real? And then it sort of challenges us again to go, oh yeah, that didn't work either. So then we look for another way. Should we involve the child in all those processes? Probably not. Do we? Yes. But how do we step back and just sort of say, I'm triggered by someone telling me that I need to speak up. So we've sort of caught it before we project it out into the world. Does that make sense? So if we could look at someone giving us a criticism and it hits us, it's like, oh, wow. Yeah. I feel judged, or I feel reprimanded, or I feel blamed. We've got an opportunity to catch it before we make all of these, it's almost like convoluted, or I sort of think of it like morphing, you know, when things get shape-shifted. Like
we start to create a story around it.
Yeah, we create a story around it and we'll try it out, we'll project it onto someone else, we'll say the same thing to someone else because we didn't know how to hold it in our body, so we have to get rid of it. All sorts of things will happen. So it's really beautiful just to go, oh, wow, someone's telling me how to parent. What does that feel like?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's face it, as soon as you get pregnant, people are willing to share their stories with you and 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 tell and what happened for them and and process by having that conversation, but also pass on their learnings to you. And it is a constant kind of need to filter and as you just shared then, to stop and say, oh, recognize.
Yes.
So in that space, what are some useful things that we can do as a
absolutely. Like I remember I don't know if I've told you girls this story before, but I remember when my youngest son was around about 20 and he asked me why I hadn't sorted out my shit before I had children.
Same.
Good question.
Thanks, Mum.
I said to him that I didn't know I had any shit till I had children.
I was going to say, didn't you do the thing that you want to say when you think about it for like half an hour later, you go, actually had my shit sorted out, then children came.
I didn't know I had any shit before I had children. So I think just being curious, like I think we live our lives. So this is like more of a generalized like soul response in a way, Amanda, but then to apply it to parenting, I think we live our life in a very program structured way, like we grow up having to achieve things, we grow up getting to the next level, we grow up learning how to be in public, all sorts of, we grow up being conditioned. And then when we meet another, we don't generally meet them from the essence of who we are. We don't meet them from a whole self, body, mind, spirit. We don't meet them from this sense of I am, this is who I am. We meet them from like a projection of what we want them to see in us almost. So that process means that it takes us longer to realize the energy that's coming at us. And as I said before, that's when we'll convolute or tell a story or get into drama or mix up something because like we haven't really quite understood the energy that's coming at us. So we naturally analyze it and project it either to another or self-talk, like, oh, I'm no good because that person looked at me sideways, or I'm a bad mother because I've been told that the way I'm speaking to my child is not right. So we do something with that information rather than, and maybe it's not possible, like I used to think that if we can support our children to understand their souls and to feel the sensory body and have their thoughts and actions align with that, then they won't have to have as many struggles. And it's really beautiful because their struggles just become more informed because it's like we can't stop relating with other people. And that filter that we have on our relationships generally comes from conditioning. But when we're in the present moment, we all sort of know what that is. But when we can pause, take a breath and feel what's coming at us without deciding, we haven't decided whether it's good, bad, indifferent, a judgment. We haven't put a story on it yet. And we just feel it. And we ask our body in a way, we sort of become not disembodied, but we become a self that can reflectively feel. So when someone says something to us, we sort of naturally start to feel through our body first. We pick up the feeling, and it might be like, oh, that hurt my heart, or that made my head ache, or that made me feel fuzzy, or that felt like a kick in the guts. Now, body wisdom is so important for us all to understand, but it gets shut down very early on. So part of that conditioning process is sort of don't listen to that. I know more because I'm trained, or I know more because I'm older, or whatever. So a lot of that gets sort of pushed aside or relegated to not as important as our mental capacities. Whereas in my work and what I've discovered as I've studied and also through mothering is that that's our primary mode of being. We feel first. We feel everything. We're sensory beings. We're feeling everything. A lot of the stuff we feel, we can't even know where it comes from. So if that's the case, we don't know if it's 3 generations ago. We don't know if it's from something that happened to our mother, or we don't know if someone's got a particular thing going on, but we feel it. Yeah. And we're trying to make sense of that based on a really limited map. So if we can just say, what if the soul perspective means that I've got to be integrated body, mind, spirit, and the body is the first thing, the sensory body, it's my vessel. The body is the first thing that feels energies. Then it decides what to do with it. Then we decide what to do with it, which is our interpretation of that feeling. Now, the interpretation can be flawed. It can be someone else's. It can be wounded. It can be, the interpretation can be off the mark of the feeling. And we live our lives sort of trying to regulate our feelings and thoughts together because we're disregarding, what did I feel and how did it feel for me? What did what that person just say to me? Where did that hit me? And then I'll make a decision about my response. But a simple technique, I guess, you know, I love before, and I love how deep we can go so quickly. You know, how do we do that? And I'm like, well, we've got to see ourselves in this way as an energetic being to start with. We've got to realize that everything that comes at us comes through the body, and that if we can attune with the body in a more present moment way, then we're actually going to start to understand ourselves, not pretend, not have to put on a fake persona, not be a false self. We can be a true self. We can be a self who feels their way through life based on what we know we need, because our body's giving us guide that we can then interpret. And the bigger the map to interpret those things, the better. So if we had a feeling in our body and we're like, I've got a sore tummy, and our caregiver's like, oh, just take some medicine, or you've got a sore tummy because you ate too much chocolate.
Yeah.
Says every mother ever. Or you've got a sore stomach because you didn't have enough sleep or whatever. So that's how we start to interpret our body responses, by what someone else has said. Whereas, yeah, and we can do this for ourselves, but this is the important thing to do with our children, is that what do you feel your stomach's telling you? Yeah. What do you think it's telling you? We don't put our story onto things. We don't load them with our, oh, you should talk louder, or you should do this because I said so. We're opening the dialogue to say, oh, what do you think your sore tummy means? Now, we might know that they had too much chocolate, that it's sleep, and that they need to have something to soothe it. But if we load them with that, then that takes away their authority. That's taking the child's authority from them. And it's teaching them that someone outside themselves is their authority, not themselves. So going back to what you were saying before, Jo, you know, like this is an important thing, that the child is the authority, but not the parent.
Yeah.
So the child's the authority of their own experience. You're the parent supporting the child to become an authority, but how does any authority support another person to become an authority? Through doing it themselves.
This is so interesting, because I know with what you do too, with the Childosophy work that you do, you know, you're being with children and you're going through their bodies to find out where they need support or where they need clearing or whatever it is.
Yes.
And I'm thinking about this as you've just gone through that beautiful, information that you've just given us, and thinking, wouldn't it be wise to be having the parent there and doing that with the parent and then doing it with the child?
Yeah.
I know, like, is that...
Well, if you did it with the parent, Jo, you wouldn't need to see the child.
Oh, this is where I'm thinking, yes.
Yeah, so energetically we mirror neurons, copy behaviors. We know enough science now to not even, I mean, there's a lot of people that will go into that, but for me, it's this intuitive sense. Like, this has always been the driver for me. And it's like, yes, like if I, as the mothership, the caregiver, the person who is really supporting another soul, and that can be any relationship really, but it's mostly parent, child, or teacher, like a lot of teachers, or practitioners of children, of which there's sort of a lot more these days because of what children are going through, with understanding themselves and not having maps that help them understand that the anxiety mightn't be theirs. It might actually be something that's carried unknown and unspoken about in another member of the family that is not able to look at it or doesn't want to see that perspective. So it's almost like if you were, I developed Childosophy because as my children were growing, I noticed when they went through things like just even basic common ailments, A to Z stuff, like physical, emotional, little tweaks or twerks or idiosyncrasies or behaviors, like I'm like, oh, they're indicating something to me about what they need, or what do I do as their mother to meet that need, rather than just going off the old map that I had of, well, if they're crying, they just avoid them or ignore them or let them cry it out. And it's almost like that never felt right for me. So it's like, oh, what do I need? And then it got to a point one day, I'm like, oh, my child's crying, but it's doing something to me. It's making me feel a certain way. And then if I can deal with that feeling, like the empathy, I can't fix it, I feel hopeless, whatever. If I deal with that, then the actual crying, it seems like magic, but it's not, the child's disposition will change because they're feeding off my feeling of not being settled. Does that make sense? So it's like we have to look down the line to see where it begun, and the original experience can be varied. Well, it's going to be varied. In a child, like the original experience could be mums, it could be dads, it could be nannies, it could be papas, it could be great aunt Mabel's, it could be something that I experienced before I had a body. It could be something that I experienced when I was a big person and you weren't my mother. It could be something I've experienced in some place that I don't even recognise.
So we're talking about past lives. We're talking, yeah.
Children, in their essence, what you were sharing in the very beginning of soul and connecting them with our essence, they are, by nature of being a child, biologically in their body when they come into the world this time, still very connected to their essence, aren't they? Like their filters are very open. There's a lot of space for things to come through.
Yes, there's a lot of research that's been done, and I talk about it in my book, The Push for a Child Philosophy, about the idea that the Jesuits knew that there's something that happens for a child by age 7. Bruce Lipton says 5. Epigenetics sort of does say can be earlier. Neurodevelopmental stuff might say a little bit earlier, but generally by age 7, as the Jesuits said, show me the child and I'll show you the man. So what we knew was the imprints from early childhood are sort of epigenetically programmed and available as a resource for caregivers, pardon me,
A resource. Let's say that a few times.
Yeah.
Yeah. A resource for parents to draw upon in wonder of, oh, what is that behaviour showing me about myself, their father, Aunt Mabel, a past life, whatever. Like, we've got to open to the broadest possible perspective we have and say, what's my child's behaviour or experience showing me about what they're carrying, so that I can do my part in repairing that. Not so I can change them or make them a compliant, well-mannered human being. And of course we love well-managed human beings, but it's like making a child something for our purpose, which is really a lot of the earlier ways of educating and raising children and parenting, was to get them to be what we want them to be, so that they can be good members of society and be moral human beings, without acknowledging that by nature we're all moral. We all have our own moral compass, and if we can support children to reveal to us what's happening for them as they interact with the world, then we're enabled to support them to know themselves, which is that philosophical tenet that Socrates says, that we can never really help someone, we can only help them to understand themselves.
I love that. I have a couple of like things that have happened as a parent that where you know, one of the children have gone and done something that's not great, and you know, it's almost like Trevor and I have been there, and you know, I'm in my state of wanting to control it, wanting to text or wanting to ring and say, get your ass home or whatever. Shut it down. Yeah, shut it down and let them know how I feel. And Trev's like, honey, what about if we just chat about what we're feeling and where has it come from? And so I've, you know, once I've gathered myself, we've sat and we've started just communicating of what I'm feeling. What is it that's bringing up the anger or the wanting to control the situation, wanting to let them know, you know, what is that in me and why am I doing that? And, you know, luckily I've got a husband that's very understanding, and we both kind of pulled apart the feelings that we have.
Yes.
And all of a sudden the child turns up at the door.
Yeah.
Comes home.
Yeah.
Doesn't know why he's come home, but he's come home and he's just like, you know, and I'm just like, every time I almost cry, because I'm like, how does this shit work? How does it work? You know, we're clearing the way, and that's what we're doing. We're bringing our own stuff out so our children, it doesn't matter who we're talking about, because this type of work is quantum and it can happen for anyone. But when we clear our own stuff, it opens up a clearer pathway to the people that we're directly connected or aligned with, to allow them to then look and go, have a little bit of space around them to see that moral compass and go, that way is not morally right for me, but for some reason in this moment I can feel where I'm out and I'm like, okay, I need to go home.
Or because you're freeing out, you're not actually carrying out behaviours that aren't theirs in the first place.
Yep.
Yeah, it was beautiful, because like so much is happening within even what you expressed, Jo. So before, when you said, Amanda, about like how do we start to do that, it's that self-reflection. But as Jo beautifully said, sometimes we get ignited. Sometimes we get like, it's got to be this and I'm worried and I'm panicked or whatever. We need to do something. Now, to have another voice of reason or someone to mirror back, perhaps we need to look at it another way. Or what if we just take a breath, come back together and feel into what else might be possible in this moment. So that connection, your intention shifted. So almost like you might have been panicked, Jo. You've got someone who's actually holding the energy field for you, where you're able to be that, but also see that there might be another way. So your nervous system starts to relax, and the nervous system's not sending out, Amanda, like you said, the same message. It's almost like there's something about what you're emanating now from your body that's sending a different message to the person you were focusing on. Does that make sense? And then in that process, you've come to be, you've breathed together, you're a unified force. If you're both the parents of the child, he feels he can come home because you've come home to each other. And there's something beautiful about understanding that we get crazy sometimes. We're human, you know, we're going to get a little bit triggered or something's going to come up. But how quick are we to come back, I guess? I mean, a lot of people call it re-regulation. I feel that misses a lot. I feel like talk about a regulated nervous system doesn't really speak to the dance that's happening energetically between people who love each other. So what does that look like when we clear all of the story and the stuff? And generally it is like, what can we do in this moment? If we're worried about someone we love, how can we come together and focus on what we can do? Can we breathe together? Can we do something that's going to say, can we pray? Can we send out like a force field? And then watch the thing that we've been focusing on change, whether it be a child or a plant or anything. Yeah.
Situation can be anything.
Yeah, of course. It can be, a stuck feeling about something. Yeah.
Because what that brings into play is how there can be, because there can be a parent or there could be two parents.
Yes.
There's two parents, you know, and also
the dynamic gets trickier.
There's also that dynamic between the parents, and if there's, you know, if there's stuff there or barriers or, you know,
there's always stuff there.
Ways of the parenting, that type of thing. It brings other obstacles to be, you know, embraced, isn't it? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I think too, you know, like there's always stuff there. There's always little things, even if you have like harmony and agree and see the same perspective and have the same values and morals, and even if all those things are in alignment, there's always going to be residue from childhood stuff that comes forward. So it's almost like when we feel that we are always experiencing stuff, it's sort of like, oh yeah, we're just unpacking lots of things, but it doesn't feel like that. It feels like hard and heavy. So then we can think, oh, it's all right because those people have got, like, they don't have as much stuff. And it's almost like, well, everyone has stuff. And when we say, oh, let's welcome it all, and go, oh, on a gradient or a spectrum, it's like, I think at times we have a lot of things that we're navigating, and at other times it might be subtler, more attuned tweaking. So sometimes we're chipping away, trying to see a shape, and other times we're like polishing it. Like, it's like, oh, there it is. So if we could see the energy dance in that way, it's like, oh, what is it in me that feels I have more stuff than others, or that I've got more to work through before my children are okay? We want to really feel into all these statements too, because it's like, this is what we're creating. Does that make sense? Because it's like really beautiful. I think we all have stuff, and I reckon if we all just said we've all got stuff, where do we start? Like, who's first? And let's get in there and let's just like work on that, because your stuff is going to be reflective of my stuff. Is going to, if that can be resolved or even attempted, like even surrender, hands up, you don't have to do much. Things will recalibrate or reconfigure, and acknowledging that it's okay to have stuff too. But also the irony is that it can feel so hard. Like, I wish it wasn't this hard to feel all these big feelings of panic or worry or not having alignment with the child's other parent. That can feel really hard, and it's almost like we need to ask ourselves, what can I do with what I've got? I've got a body, mind, spirit. I've got choices. I've got the ability to self-reflect. Most people I know have the most amazing ability to self-reflect if they're not in defense mode. So softening the nervous system and opening to wonder is a wonderful phrase that really captures the idea that we all know about mindfulness and curiosity, and we know about this notion of suspending any outcome, just the awe of what's happening. But being in the question is a term that I like to use. It's like, how do we, from this stuckness or this feeling, how do we become more open to questioning what is it that I can do with what I've got now? And I think most people always find they've got a choice. Now, we mightn't like it because we might have to stay in a woundedness a little bit longer, or we might have to realise that we're going to have to put up with a little bit of physical pain or financial pain or emotional pain or whatever it is. But most of us have that ability to make a choice. And when we can own the choices we make, that feels liberating for us and our children. So by doing something simple like, let's get together and work on this together, or let me settle my nervous system and change the story I'm telling about where my child is and why they're not home. If I can do that here and now, it doesn't need to be with someone else. It can be on your own, but you've got to be able to recognize it. So that's where I think the relational dynamics amazing, because generally someone will point out something we can't see. So if we're open, we can receive that. But if we're closed, we push it back and we don't feel like we've got a choice, but we always have a choice, always.
Yeah, all that radical responsibility. Yeah. When you've only got to sit with yourself and, you know, you're the one making the choices, you have to make, you know, you have to take radical responsibility. And sometimes that hurts.
Yeah, of course. It's just harder because, well, it can be harder and it can be actually quicker because you're not going through the projection of, don't say that, that's not what I want. You're not fighting. You're actually got to surrender to yourself in your own energy body. So this is the importance, again, of feeling into the sensory body. If we can't be in touch with our body, which a lot of us have removed ourselves from. So whatever activities, exercises, routines, rituals, whatever brings you home to feeling in your body, not bypassing, not dissociating, but feeling. What does that feel like? And that can take time, and that's best done when you're not in the demands of every day. And even that can make it hard because you can't go on retreat or whatever, but you could find 5 minutes in the morning or 5 minutes at night to do a body guided scan, just to start feeling into your body, which means that you're going to notice more quickly what it is that feels out of whack or out of balance or not regulated in your own body, and you won't need someone else to point it out. And then when someone points it out, you're already like, yeah, I felt that. I felt that straight away, and I knew that, and thanks for showing me what I knew, because now I can take it further or deeper or whatever. Yeah.
That's just so beautiful. Saying thank you for showing me, or just bringing that up one more time, because I thought I tapped into that last night. I did, but it must be still lurking. Thank you for still sitting.
I've been working on that, and you still see it? Thanks. Yeah. Oh, it's beautiful. It's like you think, oh, but I've gotten so much better, like at that. And it's like, yeah, well, on the spectrum, you're not doing the chipping, like you're actually polishing, but we get offended, don't we? It's like, don't you know what I've done with this piece of rock? Like, you didn't see it before. And it's almost like, well, it's not actually anyone else's job to see it before. You've seen it before. And you know the steps it's taken to get to this point of polishing, and you want to thank someone for saying you missed a bit.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
Brought up my stuff.
It's like I shared something with Joe the other day about how a man hangs a picture on the wall and how a woman hangs a picture up on the wall.
It's hilarious.
It's so funny. Like he's
detail.
Yeah, but it's literally what you just said. Oh, you're polishing something, and someone goes, oh, you've missed a bit over there, and you're going, well, yeah, but I've done all this, so you know what? That bit over there, why don't you polish it? It's like all these things come up instead of the thank you. I'll polish that bit.
Yeah, and you don't want the thank you to be like passive aggressive or facetious, because you really want to welcome it. But it takes a long time to get to a point, as you both would know, to be able to have worked so hard on something, someone point out the bit you've missed, and for you to go, oh yeah, because like by polishing that like is the icing on the cake or the whatever. But it takes a long time, because it's going to trigger, like if someone hasn't recognised all the hard work you've done over there, or you haven't, or you've been doing it to please someone else who hasn't recognised, or you're doing it to please mum and dad who have never recognised. And then that's what the trigger is about, more than someone saying, oh, you've done a great job, but you missed a little bit. Because we should be able to receive information like that without our stories attached to it, if we just feel into our body. And that's the beautiful thing you can do every day without it costing you a cent, is how do I feel in my body today? Is there a site that's giving me information? When that person said that, where did I feel it? And how does it feel? Yeah, so we locate where it is, and then we name a feeling. We don't say I'm pissed off or we can feel that. We're allowed to feel all of that, but it's almost like if we animate it too much, we're sort of creating something out of the trigger. We're giving it life, a story, dramatizing it, rather than going, oh, I felt that in my stomach and it felt like betrayal. Yeah. Oh. That information will send signals to every cell in your body, because you've identified it and you've named it for yourself. You don't have to tell anyone else. And then you go, where have I felt that before? And that's sort of part of the process of what Jo was talking about before with Childosophy, is that we would find an original time of betrayal, which may lead to mum or dad or early childhood, or maybe a family member, or maybe a past life. And then we get to understand the wisdom of our body in a new way. And to do that whilst supporting children and parenting is both a gift and a challenge. But by cultivating the way you receive information and the way you interpret it, that can be done alongside children, and it's usually them that push us to do it in the first place. So
what I'm hearing you share there too, Maxine, is basically a way of, because we've shared many times with people in their awakening journeys, is their body is it actually brings them to an awakening, by nature of it being they can't do anything else but. So, by tapping into the body wisdom as a daily cultivated ritual habit, and exercising that muscle of connecting into ourselves and bringing out all that cellular energetic memory, we're healing ourselves daily, aren't we? We're not building up that mud pie that's going to explode into a cancer or a osteoporosis, or there's these, we're finding ways for our body to function optimally, because there's not these little congested crossroads of a point of betrayal, or pushing that under the carpet and not acknowledging it, or the anger being repressed, and
Absolutely. And I love too, like you are saying, with your podcast, like everyone is knowing and realizing that we have to do this. Like we have to feel everything that we're feeling. We've got to be able to be embodied, which is different to, it really is about it's more than being comfortable in our bodies. It's actually using our body knowledge and wisdom to serve us through the sensory body, and then anchoring it in as a way of being. So that to me is embodiment. Like we can't embody something, like, we talk about it. When someone's got something, it's almost like when you learn to ride a bike. I think of the little ones, like it's like they start off and they wobble and whatever, and then they they're off, they've balanced and they've taken off. Now that they won't get back on and have to go back to the start to go through every step again. They've mastered it. They've, what they call, well, they've actually gotten to a stage where they're competent in that skill. So they've sort of embodied riding a bike. Like they become one with the bike, some little people might say, or they know how to ride the bike. They just know how to do that, and it's become part of who they are. And every time they get on one, they can do that. So it's like that's sort of, I think, what's happening spiritually. It's like I think we've all been wobbling in a way, and the generations before have done what they could with what they had, but we have access to so much more. Think about our technologies, think about our awareness to the essence of who we are. Like I don't think, well, I know with my study, even when I was suggesting that we need a map of the child as the soul, and I did my PhD research in 2008 where I first put that idea forward, it was like, what are you talking about? Like, what do you mean? And it's like, what is the soul aside from a religious notion 20 years ago was poo-hooed. Now it's like everything's like we've got to work with the soul. Do you know what I mean? Like it's like, so I think embodying a new way of being then leads to change, and there's no stopping it. Does that make sense? Like you're not going to go back and have to pedal and have training wheels. We're sort of off, we're beyond that. And our kids that are coming in now, they're a whole new vibration who already know how to ride bikes. In fact, they probably know how to fly aeroplanes.
Yeah.
So it's like it's a progression, and we're always healing. Jo, the beauty, Amanda, you said about the healing ourselves, both of you. Of course, anything you do, that commitment to feel your body when you're triggered, that's beginning an evolutionary leap. Does that make sense? So
that is the, I don't want to say hardest, that's the story, but that's the challenge.
Yeah.
When you're in the moment, when you're in that moment, it's very easy for us to sit and talk about it, but when you're in the moment and you have the energy of all of that, it's how do you handle that in the moment? And that's your opportunity. And, it's, yes, we talk about the soul and all of those things, and we're so much more evolved and aware of so much more than just our physical bodies. But, we really have to, in that moment, gather everything in.
Yeah.
Use what we know and our awareness in that moment to step up.
Yeah. And I think too, it's really beautiful because I was just talking about embodiment. And for me, the difference between that, because we can know a lot, we've got access to a lot now. Like I know things are getting a little bit wobbly sometimes out there because there's so much, we can have access to so much information. So then what do we do with that? If we're not balanced and centered in ourselves, it can go a bit awry. But for me, it's almost like this, not just the sanctity of life, but the reverence of life. For me, it's always been feeling that life is precious, but I'm part of this. Now, it's not a religious notion of the soul. It's just that as who I am needs to be revered. And if I can revere the essence of who I am, then I'm not going to not revere another ever. Like it's not possible. And there's a reverence, and it's not an inner reverence. It's like it is, but it's not. It's like this all-encompassing idea that I have an obligation to do the most menial work in a way that becomes sacred, because that's almost an obligation. Does that make sense? So it doesn't matter if I'm doing a podcast or if I'm at the grocery store. I want to be the same Maxine. Yeah. And I want to trust what I feel and be able to communicate that in a most clear way for everyone. I don't want to have to change it because I'm worried about whether the lady at the checkout's going to judge me or whatever. It's like I try and bring, and I think this is the embodiment thing. If we can see ourselves as souls, it means that we also have to see ourselves as having this divine journey in a human body that is the biggest indicator. It's my biggest information highway, my body. And if I learn how to understand it, then I come home to myself. And that homeness to myself is really that I'm connected to everything and that sort of divine universe, and we have spiritual limitless capacities. But if I stayed stuck in that, I wouldn't be able to go grocery shopping in a way that had reverence for the lady that dropped something on my toe as she was checking out. Does that make sense?
Yeah, despite the
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, oh, that hurt, not what the, you know what I mean? Because you're still going to feel everything. You still and that's the hardest part, Joe, you said, and Amanda, you've mentioned this too. That's the hardest part. So that's our job. No one else's. That's our job. Whoever we are as a human being, if I feel triggered or something's not at ease in my body, then I'm the only one that can actually take accountability for that. How do I start to work on that? What tools do I need? What techniques do I need? How do I start to know what I need beyond this conditioned or false self or whatever? I use false self because it's a term Winnicott used in regard to self-development children. So he said we learn, we come in as a true self and we learn over time to be a false self, to please others, to be something for others, and it's coming back to that true self. That's really our journey after the conditioning's gone. But my curiosity has always been, what if children always know they're a true self? What if we don't have to? But that's actually not possible either, because we're human beings and we have this memory in our bodies that carries through generations to serve us. And I think the way that we deal with the memories is changing, not the eradication or the changing of a species in that way. It's really about, oh, how do I deal with that? What am I using as my map forward? And how do I manage the stresses in the everyday life so that I can live a life divine every day, not just on retreat?
That's beautiful, Maxine. Just bringing that back to the children again. If we exercise that embodiment in ourselves,
Yes.
we are the truest reflection for our children.
Yeah.
And guiding them to be growing themselves the best and encouraging them to adopt that practice.
Yeah. Well, they watch. You know, they absorb. They're looking out there for a reflection of how do I be in the world. And if you're reflecting that you be in the world by tuning in with yourself, learning about communicating how you feel, managing your emotions, getting through things that might seem difficult, you know, that's being modeled, and that's how they come to understand themselves. Yeah.
Goodness, that's so beautiful. Look, we have been well, that's for an hour and a half. That's amazing. An hour 20. That's so cool.
We have a habit of,
I know, it's getting lost into it because it's just so, it just feels so right. You know, it just feels, I just resonate. It just feels like you're speaking to my soul. I actually just wanted to talk, because I think it's aligned with what we've been talking about, just to close it off too, before I know you'll have a last question. This thing with the I am.
Yes.
I keep getting, there's the I am, and then there's who we are, like love, source.
Yeah.
And this is another area that I've been understanding more of, feeling more into the essence of what it is.
Yes.
And I'm finding it really easy to see the I am as almost like a beautiful journey of learning.
Yeah.
And that the love or the source is that who I really am, and that is just love. And so when we talk about things happening around us and experiences, I try and say to myself, what would love do? And there's moments where I can jump out of the I am and into this source or love,
Yeah.
where everything disappears. The reaction, is that a good thing? Or should I be staying in the I am and feeling and experiencing
you get a choice.
Yeah, it's so
You get a choice. So I love it because what we can tend to do is dissociate. So if we don't like what's going on here, like what's happening here, I might go somewhere else and do the mantras or the I amness. And I know all of these things are important at different parts of your journey. But I would say to you, there's no difference, Jo, between the mess that I'm in and the I amness that I perceive as love, because you are that. You are that, even in your mess.
Yeah.
It's just that you forgot that. And so how long you want to forget that for, that's up to you.
Oh, nice thing said.
That was so good.
Yeah, because some days we want to forget that I am that greatness that can actually make choices and overcome anything that is coming up as a challenge for me or my children or whatever. Sometimes we have to have the experience of it being not that. Does that make sense? So it's like, it's up to you, but we don't sort of get told we have that much power, which is another aspect, because we separate those things, but there's no separation from what you're talking about as the I amness to who you are right here today with us, worrying about, as in, like conscious of time and space and what the next obligations are. There's no difference. Do we want to get into the, I guess, how long do we want to stay in the pain of it all? And the pain's necessary until we don't need it. And so you get a choice. And I don't say that flippantly, because I think you both know, and obviously if your listeners are following on from what I did with the near-death experience, I don't treat pain lightly. I revere it. Yeah, so it's like I would much rather not have emotional pain or physical pain, but if I have it, the way I choose to deal with it is up to me. No one else, because it's there. Why would I fight something that's already existing? So if we can learn to flow with it and work with it, you'll find that it gives you a message. So you might need to stay in what you're saying as this state, rather than the surrendering to the I amness or the source or love, or remembering that or saying that as a way of disconnecting. But at another level almost, and it's not even levels, but in another perspective, you are that always. And this is where our consciousness is so strong. This is where we're so powerful, is because if I believe it, then I'll create it. So if I keep believing that I'm separate from that I amness, then we keep creating separation. Whereas if I have a soul perspective that I amness is pushing me, prodding me, lifting me up, challenging me, I love this, then we surrender to that. Yeah, so we get to choose. We really do get to choose. And sometimes we might need that or think we need that, and that might take us to somewhere else, deeper in ourselves, or it might not. It might just distract us from doing the work.
I think this is going to be an episode that'll be like,
I'm going to have to go back and listen to it.
Several listens and pin to the top of the list.
Well, I'll have to watch it because I don't remember a thing.
So because when we met you before, you shared wonder, and a few people have mentioned the word wonder since, and it has a lot of philosophical meaning, doesn't it?
It does.
Wonder, and
it feels expansive to me.
Yes,
it feels like it's expansive.
Yeah, it does. When I was doing my research for my PhD, I had a first year colloquium meeting, which is you've sort of got to get together with what you've done so far, and then a committee decides whether you can sort of go further. And I remember being feeling a little bit despondent because my ideas were a little bit out there. And this is sort of nearly 20 years ago. And I remember feeling a bit despondent, and I had one very wise professor of philosophy who said to me, Maxine, don't worry about what they're saying about the idea of being more skeptical, like, because, you know, like when you're doing research, sort of you more skepticism. He said, because wonder is the source of everything.
Oh, that's beautiful.
So, yeah, and that awe and that wonder, it really is the beginnings of philosophical insight. I mean, that's sort of where the lineage of Socrates and Plato come. They questioned. They didn't take the conditioned reality. They said, what if this and what if that? And they saw beyond their condition. And there's a lot of allegories. Plato talks about the cave, and there's a lot of famous allegories that you can look at where they're really pointing to the idea of what we see is not the totality of who we are, and that if we don't question rules, regulations, and those sorts of things, then we're really living a bit of a robotic life, or we're stuck in a cave, versus wondering about what's going on. Because if I look at my child and I've already decided that their behaviour is going to be an adult problem, then I'm going to do whatever I can to try and stop that. Whereas if I look at my child and wonder why this quirky behaviour is there and get to know what it is that ignites that child, that projected outcome that someone else might hold doesn't even come into the equation, and in fact will never come to be, because your view of that child is not the same when you see everything beyond, I guess, appearances. So yeah, wonder to me is like, I wonder. I say it all the time. I say it so many times a day. If I'm stuck with something, it's a really beautiful practice just to go, oh, I wonder how this is going to work out. And then you might joke about it, but then it just becomes second nature. It's like, oh, I wonder why this is happening. And then you open. And what we do know is, from neuroscience, shows us that when we ask a question, a part of the brain lights up and will not shut down with graphic resonance until the answer comes. And that's what we're like. That's what we're like. That's what kids are like. We're like, I've got all of this wonder, and I've got questions about myself, my life, the universe, my place in it, my soul. I've got all these questions, and I wonder, rather than being told, no, you're not that. Look, you've got a body that if you cut, it bleeds and whatever. It's like, oh, I thought I could take magical trips or whatever. So it's almost like if we keep that wonder open, then the universe will bring things to show us that. So we attract what it is that we're intending, I guess. So if we want wonder, then we're going to have it every day.
Absolutely. This is so beautiful. I think Eckhart Tolle talks about this around labeling, but also he always says, when a child asks the question, don't answer it. Allow them to answer it. What do you think?
Yeah.
You know, hand it back to them, to then not shut them off or make them wrong or any of those things, or even give them an answer that is right, but it's your answer. They may have a completely different view on it.
Absolutely. And how confused do we get when we're in wonder and we don't get asked our perspective and someone tells us theirs and we're like, oh, yeah, no, that's not what I'm feeling, but okay. I love that, because I've got a chapter in my book about being in the question. And this was that wonder, the state of mindfulness that we need to adopt when relating with children. And it's exactly where that came from, Joe. When my little fella, my eldest, was just having a command of language, he asked me, why does the moon follow us? And we were driving at night, and I looked at him, and in that moment I'm like, I can't tell him. I don't know. Yeah. Like, I can tell him what I know from my adult perspective about perception and whatever, and the course of the moon in the night sky, but I will not get to know him if I don't know what he thinks the moon is following us for. And he told me, because yeah, he told me he wants to light the way. It wants to know that we're loved, and it wants to go where we're going.
And that is so essentially, and it's true, isn't it?
Yeah, and so beautiful. But it's the meaning that we have. Like, if we get if someone keeps telling us we should have this meaning about a feeling, then we sort of go, I don't know, we just get off track. We get all confused, very confused, versus what about you? What does it mean to you? And as your caregiver, can I support what it means to you? And in simple things like that, like you said, Jo, beautifully, don't tell them. Ask them to tell you what they experience. Ask them to tell you what meaning something holds for them. And you get closer to understanding them, but you also get closer to helping them to stay true to what they feel. Yeah.
A very, very fine line before we close. We're going to have to close in a few minutes. There's a very fine line, which I just came in just then around, shit, it's just gone. What I was going to say, but no.
I have no idea. I wonder what Jo was going to say.
Oh, I did. I was going to say there's a very fine line between having the answer from a loving space,
yes,
really isn't it?
Yes,
and being of service.
Yeah.
And I think as a soul, we are here to be of service for not only our children, but for everyone. And in that moment when a child's asking the question, instead of coming from a place of this illusion of love and knowing, we need to be more of service where we say, what do you think?
Yeah. Yeah, it's just beautiful because I think we do sort of get ego involved in a way. It's like, let me tell you what I know. And that's just your experience anyway. It's like, what about you? What's going on for you? And I think too, it's really beautiful because there is that fine line, Jo, absolutely. So when do I step in and share or give an opinion? But generally, it is about learning how to ask first. Yeah. What do you think? I wonder. I've always wondered that. Can you tell me what you think? Or nowadays, you know what they do? They go, oh, it's okay, I'll just Google it.
Exactly.
So you might want to just say, I wonder, let's be with that question. I'd love to know what you think. Can you feel, does it feel like something in your body? Have you felt that? Have you had an experience like that before? I don't know, like you can throw prompting questions but not answer. Does that make sense? So if they're like, oh, I don't know, it's just like, oh, I wonder what that's about. And their little body will stay alive until they get the answer.
Yeah.
For them.
Yeah, for them, because what you're bringing up for me also is an opportunity to invite more conversation around things and connection, because often we can be struggling to find things to talk around, things that aren't really interesting, and this is an invitation to have conversations that are truly connecting and explorative and expansive and allowing us to have a conversation now and again another time when we've had time to think about something, can feel into something and share what that means back. And even that connection that we were speaking around before, that feeling, that energy, that frequency that we have, it's fine-tuning that and enhancing that as well with this type of interaction, isn't it?
Yes, and there's no, it's not like if I do this and it's going to have that outcome. It's like if I have this wonder and approach to wonder in everything that I'm coming across, my children included, then the outcomes are always going to be amazing.
Yeah, I was just thinking that too, that what a wonderful opportunity to learn.
Yes.
Literally, we say that a lot, that our kids are here to teach us, and they are. But just hearing you saying what you just said just then, I was like, oh, what a beautiful bit of reflection that you did in that moment.
Yeah. We sort of don't know I guess we don't know someone until they've shared with us what they know in a way. And I think that that's just such a beautiful part of being human, and conversation and connection. And that's what makes living in this body such joy.
Yeah, such wonder.
Such wonder. Well, it's building trust again as well, isn't it? They want, you want to hear what I have to say, you value what I have to say, and trusting that the person who is asking with what you have to share.
And we all know, don't we? We all know that person who wants to have a conversation with us, and those that don't, children know that too. So sort of no faking this. It's like we have to become like our true self. We have to want that in the beginning. And I think as souls, I think we're on this trajectory that we all want that. But how we come about it's going to be so different. But when we want connection with our children, we have to start to demonstrate that outwardly, because that's what they feel. So if you're disconnected from your child, it can be simple to reconnect with yourself and intend that you want to bring that forward, that part of yourself forward with your children, and that will generally shift things. Work on yourself.
Yeah.
Can you quickly just dive into a little bit around what Childosophy is? Because we've spoken a little around it, that we've only touched on it very.
I could talk about this so much.
Sorry,
we always do this. Childosophy was born of my need, I guess, to have a map and model of children that transcended what I was seeing as a mother. Like, I didn't like that I was told children grow developmentally, and if they don't do a certain thing, then they're not going to have a certain next step. And I didn't see it that way. So I looked everywhere for a map that I couldn't find. So I ended up going back to university to study psychology and philosophy. And I really loved philosophy because philosophy helped to answer the why, not the how. Like, why do we do things as human beings? What does these behaviors mean? And why do we want this potential knowledge? What's this for in the furtherment of humanity? And philosophy answered a lot of those questions for me. So I went on to do my PhD in philosophy, where I proposed a new map of the child based on the chakras. So an energetic perspective, but in order to do that, I had to position the child as a soul, which we've talked about, and then understand and demonstrate, I guess, that when these needs are cultivated, so when we have a need for safety and security, when we have a need for freedom and a free-flowing emotional life, when we have a need to act and be motivated, so they're the first three needs, we can, when they're cultivated, it leads to an energy flow within the body, a wonderful play of the self in body, mind, spirit that allows the child to be having experiences or be in the world in a way perhaps it wasn't possible without understanding them from this framework. So Childosophy is also a modality that I developed that's based on the philosophy and the model, the map of the soul, the foundational needs model. But it's a 10-step process using energy reading, so getting into understanding how energy flows in our body and how we can read and measure energy in others through a kinesiological test, and pinpointing and finding what's going on in another body or ours. And then how do we actually work with what's coming forward as information? How do we be in the wonder about, oh, that's telling me that, but I don't agree with it. Just being with that and questioning our assumptions, questioning the things that are coming forward in our life. And generally by the end of the process, you have a lot of relief, awareness and movement in ways that you really can't describe. So that's what Childosophy is. It's my map and model. It's a complete philosophy of the child, but it's also named Childosophy because it means child's wisdom. So it's the wisdom of the child, the wisdom of the body, and how if we can help children to understand their body wisdom from the very beginnings, then anything that comes up for them can be understood as a potential thing just to work through, know more about a lesson, a roadmap, whatever it is. And I guess Childosophy has a lot of different tools, techniques, products. My book, it's my baby.
Yes, and look, I will vouch too, because I have used Childosophy with Maxine, and it is incredible. If you have a child that needs support outside of the everyday world, that's very gentle but extremely powerful. Extremely powerful. She is the bomb, and she's worked so hard, and she knows her stuff, and it's so incredible. So for our listeners, we will pop all of Maxine's details at the bottom of the podcast, and it's groundbreaking work.
Yeah.
That.
I think you're ahead of your time, Maxine.
Oh, absolutely.
I was.
Yeah. Because if you put it into context a little bit, like, you know, when you have a baby and it's getting used to going to doing a poo, it's got wind.
Yes.
It's discomfort, it expresses distress. And then when it's older, a child or toddler has different ways of expressing physical things, like you said before, a sore tummy, or, you know, aches and pains, teething, all these things.
Weeing the bed, or there's lots of different
so
things
many
that happen.
things. Understanding what these feelings mean, and then and what you were sharing before around forming wisdom with their body and understanding themselves.
Yes.
It's very pragmatic. It's very practical. There's nothing woo-woo around it.
It's actually it really is very grounded, because all of the research and the information that I garnered was sort of through my own experience, but also with working with others, but researching a lot of, I guess, journals and scientific evidence to say that there's certain things that I could categorize as an unmet need to be safe and secure, such as anxiety and fear of change and all sorts of physical symptoms as well. So that's pretty much what Childosophy does, is categorizes a lot of those common themes around each need, which makes it easier. So you can sort of look up, if my child's got wind, that it could be this, but then we need to ask the child. So then the child will give you a take that matches, but it's going to be in their words, and you're going to go, oh yeah, that's actually exactly what your body's telling you. So that's been my passion, and I really love that our children really do show us what they need, but we have to have the right map in a way, I believe, because if we see it from a limited perspective, we're going to miss so much of what's important. So we have to open and broaden, and yes, it was sort of ahead of its time trying to say that the child had this spiritual aspect of the soul, but it's absolutely now confirmed by neuroscience, epigenetics, quantum physics. Like, I love it. But yes, I was saying this stuff when it was still like, what are you talking about? Yeah. And I train others, as Jo knows, in my methodologies, and I do only one training a year. So that's something that I do as well.
Yeah. We used to use the bush flower essences in the dark flower rescue remedy. Thank God for those beautiful vibrational essences.
So beautiful.
Yeah, but they're exactly really what you're
sharing
around, you know, helping to deal with the physical, emotional, mental, spiritual.
Absolutely. And vibrational in a way. Yeah, I've developed a set of essences in conjunction with Himalayan flower enhancers, which is a business, and they've allowed me to label. They've helped me to label a set that they have of the chakras for children's needs. And those vibrational medicines help so much with the child, because if you think about our true essence without any of the other stuff, those sorts of medicines really open the nervous system in a way that talk can't, and processing doesn't work. So it's like those sorts of flower essences for children are just magical. Yeah.
And no side effects, like say with teething or earaches or tummy bugs or, you know, just, you know, upset about something they don't understand, all the things. So just
like a big hug.
Yeah. And just for the last thing before we do go, like what you're talking into as well, what came up a couple of times when we were talking with the body wisdom for children working with experiencing autism and neurodiversity and things, where, you know, being just, you know, disconnected or having a struggle in relating to their body or sensory experiences, all those things. This is also a very amazing place to come to parent, or, you know, for their children.
Yeah, I work with lots of children that are neurodivergent, and generally by being with them and feeling into, you know, the wisdom and the knowledge that's coming from them and communicating that back, it generally does have a resonance for them. So that's another way in. So it's almost like not thinking we have to do anything, just getting close to someone, feeling and mirroring perhaps what you're feeling they might be experiencing as a stepping point, not telling them, but just asking, did something just happen then because I saw you shrug your shoulders? Yeah.
Wow.
And sometimes when I shrug my shoulders, I don't know what to do or say, and they might agree. Yeah. So we're using the body's wisdom and understanding, the knowledge of the body, to communicate to someone that these are all common things. Like everybody who doesn't know might raise their, might go, I don't know. And that's a common thing that most people can go, oh yeah, we all do that. And then, but why I do it is not going to be the same way. Same reason that Joe does it or Amanda does it. So that's what we inquire into. So then it's like, oh, what did you feel then when that happened? Did you not know something, or is there something you don't want to talk about? Yeah. So then you just sort of open using that body expression. So with neurodivergent kids too, and it depends because there's so many, and every soul is so unique. So it's really bypassing that we have to do anything and just really attuning energetically with someone else and feeling what you feel and using that as a feedback for them. Childosophy helps with that as well. So yeah, it's really important.
It's amazing. I love it. I think it's incredible. And we're not just, offering them a medication, which is the best thing of all. So yeah, for all of our listeners, all of our mummies out there, and daddies and guardians and all of those that have tribe around them,
or the child within you, you're trying to find a relationship.
Yes.
And teachers love it too, just to understand what's going on sometimes for kids in the classroom. How do we understand their behaviours beyond just deciding punishment or whatever? So yeah, it's absolutely
big time.
Is there anything that you'd like to just share with, like often our last question with our guests with their awakening journeys is, what do you see with the world?
Oh, I love it. I see that we're moving into a different way of being. I see that our children are helping us to uncover a lot of things that have been repressed and unknown about through their bravery of being themselves. And I think the more we can allow children to bring forth what it is that they're offering us in the way of their gifts and their information without deciding what it is, that we're all growing, we're uncovering things perhaps that we didn't think were possible, and we're realising potentials that we could have only imagined when we were little.
Wonder.
Yeah, they are. Children are amazing, but we were all that once too. So helping us understand that naive part of ourself that is always in wonder, that's what's going to connect us with the future, I guess, of the children that are coming in, just to be curious. I wonder where this is all headed.
Yeah, I wonder too. It's wonderful.
I know, it's amazing.
Thank you, Maxine. Thanks for joining us today on Girl Awakening. We love having you on.
Oh, I love being with you too so much. Thank you very much.
I would just like to share one little thing as an accolade to my children is thank you for, as the two people I love most in the world, for helping me to be learning as much as I have learned about myself that we've shared together, because I don't do it without you.
Amazing. And who would we be if we didn't have these amazing reflections to show us what a soul is? Really just beautiful, so beautiful. What a gift. What a gift.
Thank you for your children enabling you to express this wonderful philosophy that you're sharing with our children. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. It's what I'm here to do.
Thank you, beautiful lady.
Thank you for listening to our Girl Awakening podcast. We are also on YouTube as Girl Awakening. We'd love to see you there with comments on how our guests resonated with you or your own awakening. Please share the love with a like and subscribe while you're there. A blissful thank you to Ksenia Luki, the amazing artist behind our theme song. We will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.